So I'd love for you to start with just like who you are, kind of your, I mean, not your like whole life story, right? But your story that kind of led you to this path and to your book, and what you do. And then I can ask some questions as it kind of pertains to boys and healing. So,
Sure.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. So,
Oh, we start.
yes. I'm like, that's all you. It's you.
Hey, I'm Scott Stabile. I'm the author of Big Love, and a friend referred to me as a love activist, and I really loved that title. I had never been able to really talk about what I do. I mean, I can say I'm a writer, and that's true, but I felt like my work is about much more than writing. It's really about making noise for love. I've come to believe that love is our most powerful healer, and that when we're operating with that energy, with the energy of love and all that it invites into our lives, we stand the best chance of creating deep, powerful healing for ourselves and for our world. So I've kind of owned that title now of love activist, and that's really the work that I'm doing. And I'm doing it now. I do it through writing, I do it through speaking, I do it through workshops, which is how we met.
I know.
And
I loved it so much. It was incredible. I
oh,
loved
thank
it.
you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's my mission. I am dedicated to love because I've seen in my life the changes it's created for me. And I don't say that from this airy fairy place like love, love, love. I say it from this grounded understanding that when we're operating from that energy and in that place, if we're paying attention, we see that the changes, the connections, the possibilities we create in our lives are powerful and astounding. So I would say I'm 49 now, but it was really in my 20s that I started to connect to this. I had a job in this new age gift shop in San Francisco on Haight
That's
Street
amazing.
in Ashbury. Yeah,
You're like,
it
you
was
can
called
keep the
Planet.
stage, right?
It was called Planet Weaver's Treasure Store. That was
Amazing.
isn't that great?
Yeah, so good.
To give you an indication, and I had just come from college in Michigan, moved to San Francisco, and got this job, and it was like I'd never even heard the word enlightenment, and all the books in the store were on all these metaphysical themes and these new age themes, and I was soaking it up. I'm like, this is amazing. I'm completely vibing with this. And the people I was working with and the owner of the store and the managers, everyone they were all focused on like being loving and being good people and not, you know what I mean? Like not making money and whatever. Not that
Right. You're
there's
like,
anything
where
wrong.
have these people been my whole life?
Yeah, it felt like coming,
Yeah.
you have that experience of coming home to something that you'd never even experienced, but it just feels like home.
Yeah.
And I started to see like, this is the directive that feels really natural to me. Like, what if I just have as my main focus being the most loving person I can be? And by the way, I'm not always loving. I mean,
You're like, just to let
yeah,
you know.
just to be clear, like I don't
Yes.
pretend to be always loving. But what if that is a core mission,
Right.
and I align my choices with that intention? Like, what will my life look like? And what I've come to discover is it feels more peaceful. It feels more connected. It's like it's what I want to be living. If love didn't feel so good, I wouldn't be making so much noise for it.
Right.
If hatred felt good, I'd be the most hateful person on the planet.
You're like, I would hate the shit out of you.
Exactly. Oh, good, we can swear. All right, good.
Yeah, you can totally swear.
Uh,
Yeah, because this isn't for little boys. This is for the parents of boys. It's funny. So could you talk a little bit about your history and trauma and why love and healing matter so much to you personally, and how really transforming yourself internally helps the external connection with others?
sure. So I would say the most impactful part of my history was losing my parents to murder. They were shot to death in Detroit when I was 14. And I would say even before that, though, I grew up in a fairly dysfunctional household with a lot of addiction. A brother who was addicted to heroin and ended up dying from a heroin overdose, and a father who was addicted to gambling, and feeling the toll of what those addictions took on our household, though being young within the context of it, and understanding that as this is just what our life is. You know, you don't necessarily know differently
At
if what
all,
you're
right?
living is what you're living. I had a sense when I'd go to other friends' homes, but I mean, you
Well,
only see part of the story, and other, I'm sure they all had their dramas going on too. But I definitely had a sense that some of the stuff going on in our home was not the norm, and it didn't feel right and good. And I would say so what I've come to believe and feel for myself, and I think for many of us feel this way, is the healing that we need. It's all coming from within. Like we are responsible for our healing, no matter who's responsible for past traumas or how that's played out. Like here we are right now. How are we going to move forward? What are we committed to moving forward? How do I want to be? How do I want to feel in my life? What choices can I make that align with how I want to feel in my life? So when I buried my parents' death for years, it was like I didn't know at 14 at all how to process it. And when I reflect back on that, I'm just grateful that some part of me knew to bury it, just lock it away. And once a year, literally, it was like once a year, I would have a really like meltdown cry and then lock it up and put it away again. And then when I moved to San Francisco and I got this job in this new age store, Planet Weaver's Treasure Store, and started reading these books and started opening up to being with my pain in a different way, actually allowing for it. I feel like there are no rules to grief, obviously, but I don't really believe I allowed myself to really, really grieve my parents for many years because I was, I think, too afraid to, didn't know if I could handle it. And in
well,
my
and also
early,
you didn't have this tools. Like we're 70s
no
babies.
tools.
Like therapy was not normalized.
No,
There
no,
were no tools to help us navigate our emotional landscape, like at all. And as you said,
absolutely.
thank God, because it was a coping mechanism. Maybe if you did grieve, you would have fallen apart and you waited until you were safer. I mean, I do believe that our coping mechanisms can help us.
Absolutely.
Right.
That's how I reflect on that too. I'm so grateful it played out the way it did. And I'm the youngest of 7 kids.
Oh
So,
wow.
but interestingly, all of my siblings, we all kind of responded. I don't know that we all responded to my parents' murder in the exact same way, but one of the ways in which we responded very similarly is that we never talked about it.
Oh wow.
None of us with each other at all. So it was like it was never brought up. We weren't talking about our parents. I think it was just too painful. Then in my 20s, I started opening up more, and I felt ready to and allowed myself to grieve and to cry and to rage and to feel all the natural responses to losing your parents and to losing them in such a violent way. And what what I believe ultimately, what I see in our country, certainly, though I know it's not isolated here, is that we are we are so afraid to feel, and so we're addicted to numbing. We're addicted to our addictions that prevent us from feeling, and that can look like drugs and alcohol, or it can look like shopping and food, it can look like TV and the telephone. However it looks, I've in the cell phones have really shown me what I maybe suspected anyway, which is that we are all capable of being addicted.
Oh yeah.
Everyone is
Everyone.
addicted in some
Yeah.
way. So, but what I've come to see is that when we actually allow ourselves to be with our feelings, which is something, boys and girls are conditioned in very different ways around this. And even though we are evolving, we are moving forward in the right direction, that movement feels very slow.
Yes.
So we're
Slower
the
than it should be. Like it feels a little bit like, come on, we're
come
smart. We
on,
can do
people.
this.
Seriously. And it's like the conditioning around boys is still stoic, be silent, don't share your feeling, man up. That phrase makes my head want to
I
explode
know.
when I hear man up. And
And also, it really shocks me because even really progressive people that I know, they may not use the expression man up, but they might say grow a pair, or they
yeah,
might say, well, don't be soft, or don't
yeah,
be whatever. And it's like,
yeah,
we're all human beings. We should be allowed the whole range of our feelings and a way to handle them, like express them, have words for them, regulate them,
absolutely,
like, and
absolutely.
just
Yeah,
messaging on both sides of like, don't feel, right? Don't,
absolutely.
right.
Yeah, absolutely. Because women need to be like caretaking all the time and smiling and making sure everything's okay from that angle,
Yeah.
and men need to be making sure everything's okay from that angle. So no one's sharing their feelings and
No one's
talking about
okay.
what's real.
No one is okay.
Yeah, everyone's messed up. And
Yes.
so I feel I mean, I love what you're doing here with these interviews, because any energy we can give to communicating to boys that feelings are entirely natural and incredibly healthy, and speaking about them is healthy and healing, and creating safe spaces for boys to do that. This is one of the ways we heal our world. I'm so excited. Like, it can't come fast enough, honestly, because the thing about it, Kimmy, is we're all everything. We hold masculine and feminine within us, every human being on the planet. So what happens when we don't feel compelled to stifle it, when we allow those energies to exist within us in whatever way feels most natural for them to exist? And the feminine, what that invites in all of us is more receptivity, more vulnerability, more openness. And that's how we heal, because those energies are much more, for me, solidly rooted in love,
What would you
and
say the healthy masculine energy is?
for me, when I'm feeling, I feel like there's a certain groundedness that comes with masculinity, a certain when it's healthy, when I'm feeling healthy in my masculinity, there's a way in which I feel grounded. I feel rooted to the earth. I feel masculine. There's an assertiveness, not an aggression,
Yeah.
but a way about moving through the world with an assertiveness, with
Yeah.
a strength, with a confidence, with a composure that can be very beautiful and very powerful when it's not locked in this egoic place,
Right.
right? But it's from this place of understanding your worth in the world and being willing to communicate it. So that's what's coming up for me right now when I
Yeah,
think
when I
about
think about yin yang or yin yang, that the black is the feminine and it's
Mhm,
receptive, and the
mhm.
white is the male and it's active. So I really just think of it as these movements of active, kind of forward in the world, and
Yeah,
receptive, letting things come to you. Like
yeah,
that's the kind of core base. So
yeah.
totally
And
agree.
it's beautiful. It's so healthy when it is healthy in a person. It's so beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, you can feel the masculine energy in a woman. You can feel the feminine energy in man. It's like, it's beautiful.
Yes. And to your point that we all have it in us in different combinations,
Yeah,
and in those combinations are unique to every person, and at least let yourself choose by letting yourself have that whole range. Like, if you're, what I love about the work you do is you really have people look at their conditioning. So as a woman, I'm looking at my conditioning. As a man could look at his conditioning and then make choices, like be
yeah,
more conscious. I mean, that's what you're
absolutely,
basically kind of doing. If you're more conscious, then you can choose love and not just be so
absolutely.
reactive, right? So that's
And
what I
not,
think is so cool.
yeah, not exactly, and not continuously fall back on your conditioning. You can become aware that how you're operating is from a place of conditioning. And as far as like parents, because we're conditioned first and foremost by the people who raise us,
Yeah.
whether they're parents or grandparents or an aunt or whatever it is, they're conditioning. They're the first ones to condition us,
Yeah.
right? So the more conscious parents and caretakers are, the more they're still going to condition their kids. You can't help it. Like, that's a part of the process of parenting.
Yeah.
But at least the ways in which you'll be conditioning your kids will be more aligned with a more conscious, loving, compassionate, open, vulnerable way of being. And then little boys are growing up to see that when I cry, I'm not being told not to cry.
Right.
I'm not being told quit being like a little girl, as if that's the bad thing anyway. You know what I mean?
because the
Yeah.
feminine is demeaned, right, in this
Yeah.
culture. So
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. I notice it with my boys. They cry and have no problem crying. They respect their bodies and other bodies. Like I hear them fighting and they're like, it's my body. So they're really like, so I'm doing a good job with that,
You're
teaching
doing a
that
great job.
early. Yeah, so
It's huge.
what
I
it
don't
is.
take that for it's huge that your boys can cry and feel okay crying, and
Yeah.
it speaks to how you're parenting them.
I'm trying. And so, what I'm interested in is that it's not enough to teach boys, young boys, social emotional learning tools, because then if they go home and their father says, you're being such a pussy, right?
Yeah.
Then all
Yeah.
those tools go out the window because you just want to be loved and not rejected by the people who are making sure you survive. And so, I do think there's
Yeah.
such a component about healing the parents, and that goes back to what you do in terms of looking at self love and healing yourself and finding your worth, because then you will be a better parent, or you will be a better lover, you will be a better partner. And so I'm curious if you have, advice for a parent who's struggling to self regulate their own anger, whether you're a man or a woman, or some way to start that inner healing process so you can be more conscious, like some tips or tools for people.
Sure. I mean, for me, first and foremost, there's got to be a desire and a commitment to do it, right? So, like for me, awareness is always the first step, bringing awareness to the ways in which we're showing up in our lives and recognizing how it feels in our being. So if you're someone who's like, I'm getting angry all the time, and if you're just, a lot of people are on autopilot with that and they just move through the world in this rage at everyone and everything and don't even really consider how it's making them feel. But if you want to start creating changes in your life, when you're in a moment of anger, like how's that making you feel in your body? How's that making you feel in your being? Is this something that you feel like is adding more peace and joy and meaning to your life, or is it something that's taking away from those things? And if so, are you committed to making a change? If I really believe if people aren't committed to creating changes, they're not going to do anything about it. And conversely, if you are committed to making changes in your life and you take action to honor that commitment, your life is going to change. So if I were just starting out and being like, I'm sick of living this way, I'm sick of I'm sick of this bullshit,
Yeah.
right? I would start looking for books that speak to, if it's anger, that's my story, or if I'm like miserable in my relationship and don't know what to do, or I feel really codependent, I would start looking for books. I'd start listening to podcasts that speak to these things that I'm having issue with. That for me is a very quick and easy, in the case of podcasts, free starting point for people, where because what happens when you start going down that road to healing, one of the beautiful things that happens is you start to realize you are so not alone in it.
Yeah.
And there's something not only comforting, but empowering about understanding that. And that can also serve to provide more energy to keep you going. You're reading stories that are markedly similar to your own, and you're seeing that people who were sharing the same types of struggles as you are manage somehow to transcend them.
Right.
They found tools that were working for them, and hey, maybe these tools will apply for me. Like, I happen to believe, Kimmy, that people intuitively, if we start really listening to ourselves, not just our minds. When I'm talking about listening, I'm not talking about the mind, which is
It's
lying to
really
us
that inner
constantly.
knowing. Yeah, it's very different.
That inner knowing, like we will come upon the tools that we need for ourselves. And so people can suggest things, you try them out, you see how that makes you feel. What does that do for you? Do you feel open to that tool? Is it helping? If so, continue, keep doing it.
Right.
If not, discard it, keep looking, come up with your own. But
Can I go back to one point that you
you,
made? Just because I feel like that commitment that you're talking about obviously comes from a place where you realize your behavior or your feelings aren't working for you anymore, right? Like you come to some kind of place where you're like, well, I can't be codependent anymore because I'm so depressed, or I'm so tired, or I'm so this, like I have to make a change. So what about the people who don't necessarily know that? I mean, people repeat patterns, like let's say anger, for example, they'll stay in their anger. It must serve them on some level because maybe that helps them feel better about themselves, or it helps them feel right, or it helps them feel something. So what would you even say to help people like look at themselves differently, even if they're not committed or they don't know it's a problem? Like just starting at that point, like I'm a parent, I'm noticing I'm angry all the time. I don't necessarily feel committed to change, but I also know I want to raise my kids better than I was raised. So like, what would you suggest there?
Well, there's a little, for me, there's a bit of a mixed message in what you're saying, because if
Okay,
it's someone who really doesn't want to change, if they don't really want to change, then I don't know that they're going to have the awareness that they're not raising their kids in an okay way necessarily. What I guess the mostly what I feel about it is you can't force anything on anybody. So
right.
if someone is not showing up with a desire to create change in their lives, who the hell am I to come in and say, hey, you need to create change in your lives? We have no control over the choices of other people. And
True, I totally agree with that. I just mean in terms of inspiring change as opposed to helping people along a path that you're already on. Like, so for example, why I signed up for your course is big love. That expression means something to me.
yeah.
And it has for a really long time. And it's a mission that I have. I feel like operating from a place of love has more power than operating from a place of fear. And so for me, that really spoke to me, right? So I was listening, I saw your face, I saw you talking. I'm like, I want him, and I went after it. But yes, but I just mean, like, is there a way to inspire people to take a breath and stop and look at themselves to see if they're feeling or they're not feeling, or one feeling's prominent or something like that? Or is that something you're just not interested in at all? Which is fine
No,
too.
I think maybe by example.
Right.
Right? It's like you're parenting your boys in a specific way. And
Right.
I believe, knowing you the way I know you through being in a workshop with you, I suspect you're bringing a lot of consciousness, a lot of awareness, working really hard at creating um, boys that are centered in love in the way they're moving through the world. So if other parents are going to be seeing your boys, they're going to be seeing how you are in the world. And ultimately, I think that's some of the most powerful ways we can inspire others, is simply by the example we're setting for other people. So
Right.
there's nothing dogmatic in it. You're not like pointing fingers. You're not saying this is how it needs to be done, but
Right.
people are seeing that your relationship with your boys is, wow, I like the way this is. I like these boys are growing up, and maybe that's going to be the catalyst. We can't know
We
what
can
the cat,
know.
we can't. So, but we can always continuously choose to show up in alignment with love, with what feels right in our hearts. And I trust that when I'm operating from that place, it will touch people however it touches people.
Right. You
And
can't control it. All you can do is keep coming back to love for yourself. So I think that's
exactly.
also why I responded to you, because that authenticity comes through. There's not a fake positivity. There's nothing fake about you, right? Like you just are really like you own your stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're very quick to be like, hey, I'm not always great at not, doing this thing. And you normalize feelings and you operate from a place of genuine love. So to your point, being the example, being what you want to see in the world.
Absolutely.
Right.
And then if that's what we can always be doing, and then if you find that there's another parent in your circle that comes up to you and says, I'm seeing something working for you and it's not quite working for me, and there's an invitation there, then like there's an invitation to share.
Right.
But I've made the mistake, honestly. I've
I want to
I've
hear it.
made this mistake one too many
Yeah.
times
Okay.
with dear friends,
Okay.
of like offering my opinion when they when they didn't ask for it, and if people aren't asking for your advice, I've found that they generally do not want it. And it can feel really invasive. It can feel really, because I mean, I'm a very
You're
sensitive.
on turning red because I'm totally like, I have to be very good about that. Like
No, it's
I,
hard.
yeah, to really come to this place of my love and curiosity, or like my seeing something, because often I can see things in people.
Exactly.
Unless there's an invitation to see that or speak about it, it is none of my business. And that's something I'm really
Exactly.
working on. So I
Me
relate to
too.
that. Yeah.
Me too. Absolutely. And the other thing I really try to remember is that not everybody's here to heal. Not consciously. Not everybody is here in this lifetime to be on a conscious healing journey the way you and I are. Not everybody's here to like really look at their shit and really address it and really move beyond it. You know what I mean? Like that's not the journey for, not only is not everybody, most people aren't. And I try to really just, because for me, I see so often how that's my ego. It's like
Yep.
this need to help people, this need to like point things out, or the desire for people to want for themselves a better life. It's all ego bullshit. It's like
Right.
who am I to say that the journey of this individual is any less than exactly what it needs to be in this lifetime, in this reality? You know, and when we can come back to a place of trust around that each person, it's a hard place to get to,
Yeah.
but yeah, their journey is not my business,
Right. And so
you
you teach and write
know.
and give this message not from an ego place, but from a place of this is what I'm doing. This is what's worked for me. And if someone's interested, they'll find you, kind of thing.
Yeah, and it's not to say that I don't, I mean, I have a huge ego too, right? No, I mean, my,
Let
you
me
know
be
what,
clear, right?
let's just be clear. But yes, my approach to my work has been like, I am speaking from my experience of my life and what I witness in the world. And if it resonates with you, beautiful. If it serves you, great. And if not, great. And at the so that's the general thing. And at the same time, my ego's like, uh, love me, adore me, believe me, think what I'm saying is amazing. You know what I mean? And
You're
that's
like, could
all.
I just get like a compliment? Could someone just be like, oh my God, I really like your beard? Or that was brilliant when you said this. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
And that, like the ego soaks that shit up, but ultimately, I think one of the things I've gotten much better at is just recognizing that for what it is. Like not judging myself too harshly because I have an egoic mind, because all human beings have it, and not stopping myself from doing the work I feel called to do, because I understand that sometimes that work isn't just rooted in this desire to serve and like love everybody, you know? It's like that's okay too. You
Right.
know, I feel like
Two
the
things can exist. Right.
yeah, the people who touch, like the people whose work touch me the most, they're they still have their shit, and I can see their shit, and it doesn't take away from how their work touches me. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Yes.
We're not
Yes.
perfect. We're human.
We're human.
We're human.
So, how long have you been giving workshops? How many years?
I've been giving workshops probably for about 4 years. I think I started maybe 4 years ago,
Okay. And so,
slowly.
in that 4 years of doing workshops, do you see any patterns in particular with parents, whether it's a father or a mother, in terms of like something that could be looked at or worked on, even though you're not from a place of pointing fingers? So, I get that.
Yeah, and I also say this as someone who's not a parent,
I
right?
know. I
So
know.
there's a
Yeah.
lot that, but yeah, communication first and foremost, and like lack of healthy communication, boundary creation between parents and children is almost non-existent in a lot of the people I talk to.
Can you give me
And
an example of that?
parents aren't able often to honor their children's journey as their journey, as their own, right? I feel, and again, I can't really, I can imagine how difficult it would be to separate yourself from the journey that your child is taking, and to understand that yes, you're the model, you're guiding them on it, but they have to live their lives and experience what they're experiencing on their own without the parents coming in and trying to correct everything and make everything okay and make them feel okay and take away the pain and all of these types of
Right.
stories that I feel like a lot of parents lock into, that from observing it, I don't necessarily, I see the motivation behind it, and I understand that it's rooted in like wanting to love your kid and make sure they're totally okay and not hurting. And yet that's not the reality of this planet, right? Pain is part of it, rejection is part of it, all the things that we're all feeling is part of it. And I think that kids need to see, we all need to see at some point, that we're able to be with these feelings that our parents want to protect us from, and we're able to survive them.
Right, because that's how resilience is
That's
created,
exactly.
right?
So it's almost like this hyper coddling that seems to be going on in more recent generations
I
than
agree. Because
I
when
grew
we
up. I
were,
wasn't coddled at all. I
I,
was
when
totally
we were
ignored.
growing up, it was like, where were they? Why are there
Yeah.
Playboy magazines?
And maybe it's a
They
response to that,
why are you taking a pipe? Right.
Totally. It could just be, it's the pendulum swinging to the other end. And then I've also in my groups had several older parents who've had children dealing with addiction
Yeah.
and not being able to separate themselves from the choices their kids have made, totally blaming themselves for the choices their kids have made, which again, I think is very natural with parents.
Yeah. But
But
there is an interesting connection between what you just said. If you're raising your children in this way that's not allowing them to feel their full range of feelings and their full range of experiences, like that can lead to numbing and addiction, right? So it's
yeah,
like if you're guarding against the feeling,
right.
whether it's within yourself or your child, there is going to be that. So it's not to say like to blame the parent, but it's
Yeah.
just interesting to look at that because in some ways, I don't know if you know Mark Brackett, he has a book called Permission to Feel.
No.
He founded the Yale Social Emotional Learning Center.
Okay.
But I love just that expression, permission to feel, that if
Yeah.
I give myself permission to feel, and if I trust myself that I can survive my feelings, which is very hard because sometimes when you're feeling it, you don't think you're going to survive it, then
That's it.
then I'm more apt to help my kids do that, right? To say, you got this, you
Absolutely.
can feel this.
And you're also setting an example.
Right.
Again, it comes back to that, like you're living the honest expression of what you're professing to your kids. I mean, so often I feel like parents are saying one thing and doing another.
Right.
Get off your get you know you're it's like get off your phone while the parent is just scrolling and on social media. It's like you're spending too much
Refresh,
time on
refresh, refresh.
you know what I mean? It's like these are contradictions, and kids are very aware of these types of contradictions. It's very much do as I say, not as I do with a
Yes.
lot of parenting.
Yes.
My father used to say that all the time. Do as I say, not as I do. And when I was a young kid, I was kind of like, this is some messed up shit.
You're like,
Like this is
bullshit. I'm calling
it's
bullshit on
bullshit,
this.
you know? And I mean kids tune into that stuff. They're sensitive. They know that.
Yeah. And also, they probably feel safer if you're someone who knows you can trust yourself, right? Like you can
Absolutely.
trust your feelings and you're going to honor yourself. And if you honor yourself, then like if I honor myself, I'm going to be more able to honor you and honor my children, right?
A
Because then,
100%. That's for me the core of self-love. It's like one of my favorite quotes is from the Buddha. He said, "If you truly loved yourself, you could never hurt another." And when we're raising kids, we're raising little boys that they're not supposed to feel, they're not supposed to cry, they're not supposed to have any of these real feelings. And little girls in their
yeah,
different
yeah,
way.
different ways. Yeah.
It's like what we're telling them is who you are as you are is not okay. And that message makes it that much harder to love ourselves because we're conditioned at such a young age to believe that aspects of who we are simply not okay and are not lovable. So
And
we
that's where
don't
the
love
shame
them.
comes in. And then if you feel
Yes.
shame, then you're like, well, I'm not lovable or I have to behave this way. right? In order to be
Yeah.
loved. And so then that's automatically not authentic because then I'm just doing and performing for you.
So there is no way around being judged, and that can feel really heavy at first.
Yeah.
But then when you really tune into that truth, it's like no matter what you do, you're going to be judged.
Yeah.
So you can live in this tight box of conditioning, this prison that doesn't reflect your truth, or you can live like in your freedom. And I, right? And no matter what, you're going to be judged. So knowing that you'll be judged no matter what, why would you ever choose
Why
this?
would you ever choose that?
Why? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
If people are going to judge you, let them judge you for your truth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kimmy. Thanks
Thank
for what you're doing here. It's so important.
thank
And I'm really honored that you have me on as a part of it.
Yeah, I just feel like at the core of all of it, if little kids can grow up knowing that they have worth, like if they just know they have worth and they don't have to do anything for that worth, and they're
Yes,
lovable even if they get angry and even if they're not always appropriate or know the right thing to say or do. I mean, that's so healing right there. And that's the work you're doing. I mean, that's the work you're doing as an adult, but it's an example for if I can start doing that, then I'm going to help this generation, right? It's just a ripple effect.
absolutely. And I'll tell you, in the workshops that I've done, the majority of people who show up for them struggle with self-worth
Yeah.
as adults. And I agree fully with what you say. What if it is built into you as a child
Yeah.
as just this understood thing? It's not even a question. Of course you're worthy, no matter what. You
No
can't,
matter
you were
what.
born worthy, you'll die worthy. That will never be up for debate. Imagine moving through your life, through your adolescence, into your adulthood, understanding that. It would change everything.
It would change everything.
Everything.